Hello, dear viewers. Today's story is a rollercoaster ride through the tangled webs of family, love, and betrayal. I'm Jason, your storyteller, and we're about to go on a road trip. Grab a seat, fasten your seatbelts, and here we go. We still have room in the freezer, so I'm thinking a quick stop at the Kroger for some more ground meat. I looked up at the face of Kate, my wife of 20 years, as she spoke through the 40-foot luxury RV's open window. This might very well be our last road trip camping vacation as a family. Our daughters would be starting as freshmen at the University of Texas at Austin in 6 weeks, and everyone had been looking forward to this trip. Kate had seemed a bit distant as of late, and I thought this trip might be a chance for us to reconnect. There would be opportunities for our daughters to go off and explore together, and I was hoping for some intimacy with my wife. Something that had been sorely lacking as of late. That shouldn't take any more than a half hour, so I don't see a problem there, I replied. We weren't on any type of schedule, and had given ourselves plenty of time to get from Fort Worth to Amarillo by mid-afternoon. I was in the process of loading the luggage into the exterior compartment of the giant RV. Anything that might be needed for tonight had already been stowed in the interior storage areas. Taylor and Kendall, our 18-year-old twin daughters, were sitting in the lounge area of the RV, texting their friends. It would be a month before they would see their friends. For a teen girl, that is a lifetime. Boyfriends and girlfriends would break up, get back together, and break up again over the course of this vacation. Rifts among friends would begin, heal, and begin again. The daily drama that is the life of a high school girl would go on without them for a month, with only the electronic tether of a cell phone keeping them apprised of all the life-altering events they were missing. We were towing our Toyota Highlander, and would be able to take side trips and go on excursions, leaving the RV at the various campgrounds for a base of operations. Hopefully, these adventures would take their minds off whatever life-altering events they were missing. Okay, I'll put together a list so I can get in and get out as fast as possible. She pursed her lips at me and made a kissing sound. Love you, baby, she said before turning away from the window. This morning she was wearing black yoga pants, a black tank top, and white tennis court shoes. Her blonde hair was pulled into a ponytail, and the only makeup applied was a natural lip gloss. At 5'11" she was naturally lean with breasts that were proportionate to her body. She was only 5 pounds over her college weight when she started for the University of Texas women's volleyball team. She was beautiful in the girl next door way and glowed with excitement about our upcoming vacation. When I first proposed the trip, she seemed reluctant, but that reluctance had morphed from grudging acceptance to growing excitement over the last few weeks. It had been since before the pandemic began that we had last taken the RV out, and the girls were almost as excited about seeing the Southwest United States as they were about seeing Disneyland when we got to California. They took after their mother physically, but they both shared my aptitude for math and logic, and were leaning towards engineering as a career, just like their dad. But they were first and foremost teenagers looking for fun. I had just placed the last bag into the exterior luggage compartment when I was startled by the screech of brakes, as a red Mustang rocked to a stop, nose almost touching the rear of the RV. A young guy hopped out of the car and strode quickly towards me. He appeared to be in his mid to late 20s. He had blonde hair and a blonde mustache, and looked to be about my height of 6'2", but he looked to be in a little better shape than me. He looked muscular and fit, whereas I had acquired a dad bod over the 20 years since graduating college and getting married. I was 20 pounds over my college weight and had recently begun running again in an effort to lose that weight. As he quickly walked towards me, I could see the anger on his face. "Where is she, son of a bitch?" he shouted at me. I took a step back, startled at his vehemence. Katie, come here. I'm taking you away from this abusive asshole," he shouted. I must have looked confused as well as concerned about this psychopath showing up at my house, calling me names and shouting for my wife. "Who the hell are you?" I shouted at him. I was bracing myself for an attack in case the crazy dumb dick made a run at me. "Where's Katie?" he asked again, this time with even more aggression in his voice. I was beginning to get a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach about this. My daughters exited the RV, and I could tell by the positions of their cell phones that they were recording. My wife stepped out of the RV. She was pale as a ghost, and her face appeared frozen in shock. She seemed incapable of speech at that moment. "Katie, let's go. I'm taking you away from this abusive asshole. You'll never have to worry about him again." He held out his hand towards my wife. "Let's go." My daughters approached me and stood on either side of me, slipping their arms around my waist. "Mom, who is this guy? Why does he keep calling Dad abusive?" Kate did not answer Taylor's questions. She looked from the stranger to me and then back to the stranger. She had a look that seemed to be a mix of shock and fear. Her mouth was open like she was trying to speak, but nothing was coming out. "I'm Kate's fiancé," he replied to my daughter. We're just waiting for your parents' divorce to finalize so we can get married. I closed my eyes and slowly exhaled. I was trying to center myself to remain calm. Blowing up would do me no favors, especially with my daughters recording everything. Mom, what is that man talking about? Taylor said, and Kendall looked upon the scene with eyes that seemed to have outgrown her face. Kate, I said gently. She just looked at me, face frozen in fear. Kate, I repeated. Is this true? Do you know this guy? Are you engaged to him? My wife just looked at me. Her eyes seemed to not comprehend the situation that presented itself. I had seen this to a lesser extent in previous situations with Kate. How long have you been in a relationship with my wife? I asked the stranger. For the first time since he exited his car, he seemed unsure of himself. 9 months. We started at the beginning of the school year. So, he was a teacher just like Kate. Given his appearance, probably a coach at the high school as well. She's told me all about how you manipulate her and your kids, and are emotionally abusive and borderline physically abusive to them too. I'm here to take her away from your bullshit. Our father is not any of those things. If our mother actually said those things, then she is lying to you, Kendall said. Mom, did you say those things about Dad? Let me explain, Katie said. She could finally speak, and the first thing out of her mouth was cheater speak. Taylor and Kendall both had disgusted looks on their faces. Explain what? Taylor shouted at her mother. Are you having sex with this guy? Are you cheating on Dad? Tears were rolling down the faces of all three women. I shook my head. No need to explain anything. I reached into the luggage compartment and pulled out Kate's suitcase. I set it down in front of my wife's fiancé. She's all yours, I said. I turned my daughters towards the RV. Let's go, girls. We can still get to Amarillo by late afternoon. My daughters gave my wife a nasty look as they turned their back on her and walked towards the RV's door. They turned in unison, extending their middle fingers to their mother and her lover. Kate clutched at my arm. Peter, please, don't leave me behind. The desperation was coming off Kate in waves. Her lover stood there helplessly. This was not playing out the way he envisioned. He had seen himself as the white knight coming to her rescue, and was now faced with the idea that the damsel in distress might be the dragon in disguise. Don't throw us away. I need to be far away from you. I'll reach out to Terry and get the divorce started. Get yourself an attorney and give their contact information to Terry. Terry Carr had been my college roommate, and we had remained close friends for almost a quarter century. Although he did not practice family law, he did have a lot of connections, and I knew that I would be in good hands. Kate sank to her knees and began wailing. An hour ago, seeing her in that condition would have destroyed me. Now, not so much. My daughters settled in and I pulled the RV away from the curb. In the mirror, I could see Kate with her face in her hands as her boyfriend awkwardly put his hand on her shoulder while watching the RV drive away. The drive from Fort Worth, Texas to Amarillo, Texas along State Highway 287 is about as boring a drive as you will find anywhere in the US. Miles of nothingness until you get to the void that is Wichita Falls. I remember an article in an old edition of Texas Monthly magazine that I had come across at my grandparents' home. The article listed the 10 worst jobs in Texas. Coming in at number 9. Chicken sexer, the person that probes hatchlings to determine gender. Number 10. Being a resident of Wichita Falls, Texas. We did not stop in Wichita Falls. After Wichita Falls is Quanah, Texas. Named for the great Comanche chief Quanah Parker. Born to a white woman who had been captured by Comanches as a child, Cynthia Ann Parker and her Indian husband, Comanche chief Pettinacona. We ate lunch in the small town and walked around the town square, as I took pictures of the girls in front of the Quanah Parker monument at the Hardman County building. Cynthia's story was the inspiration for the John Wayne movie The Searchers. Another way in which my daughters took after me more than their mother was in our appreciation of classic films. In the weeks prior to taking our road trip, we had watched several classic movies, including The Searchers and the Paul Newman movie, HUD, filmed in Claude, Texas, which we would pass through shortly before arriving in Amarillo. All three of us had turned our cell phones off as we drove away. I knew that one of two things was going to happen. Either we would receive a barrage of calls and texts from Kate begging us to return for her, or there would be radio silence as she realized she was now free to leave us and her life behind and be with the new love of her life. No controlling, abusive husband or daughters to encumber her. Freedom. A boring drive like 287 gave me plenty of time to think things through. The RV, although huge at 40 feet, was a dream to drive. The RV was not actually mine. It was a joint purchase made by my parents, Guy and Tony Conroy, and their best friends Dawn and Emily Franks. My mother and Emily Franks had been best friends since the 8th grade. They had double dated for prom in high school, and roomed together at North Texas State University in Denton, Texas. It was at NTSU that Tony Peterson met a shy pre-law student named Guy Conroy. They dated for several weeks before Guy and Tony introduced her best friend Emily to Guy's best friend Don Franks, another pre-law student. 2 years after graduating from law school, Guy was married to Tony and Don to Emily. Less than 2 years after graduating law school and within 6 months of each other, both couples delivered healthy babies, a boy named Peter, to honor Tony's family, the Petersons, for Guy and Tony, and for Don and Emily, a beautiful blonde angel they named Katherine, after Emily's mother. Katherine was inevitably shortened to Kate. Memories of Katherine began before I recall knowing her. There was never a time when she was not in my life. The first time I saw Kate naked was when we were less than a year old, and our mothers stuck us in a bathtub together. That is a photo that I still shake my head over. Today, parents would be arrested for taking a photo like that. We were each other's first everything. There is no experience that was not shared by the two of us. Every action, from the first ice cream cone to the first roller coaster ride to the first day of school to the first kiss to the first time making love. We went to the University of Texas together, me to the School of Engineering and Katie to a degree in literary studies and a teaching certificate. I got a job at an aerospace manufacturing company in Fort Worth, and Kate began graduate school at NTSU, our parents' alma mater. Over the next 7 years, Kate received her PhD in literature, began teaching at Fort Worth Community College, and gave birth to her daughters. After Kate was settled into her teaching career, I made the decision to go into business for myself. I had 6 patents to my name from my time at the Aerospace Corporation. I was hoping to take all 6 with me. However, in arbitration, it was ruled that 2 of my patents were work product and belonged to my previous employer. 4 of my patents, however, were ruled as belonging to me and were not work products. I was free to use and license them at my discretion. I licensed 3 of the patents and decided to open a manufacturing operation to build the 4th one. Although 2, we were entwined to form one. We were better, stronger, and happier together. We were destined to be joined forever. Until we weren't. This was not Kate's first time to stray. 5 years ago, she suffered a miscarriage. The pregnancy was a joyful surprise, and once the initial shock wore off, we were thrilled beyond measure with the idea of a 3rd child. Katie had been given antibiotics for an impacted tooth, and as our doctor explained, this more than likely affected her birth control pills. Whatever the reason for the miracle, we were over the moon. 3 months into the pregnancy, while teaching a class on gender identity in the works of Hemingway and Fitzgerald, Kate began to cramp badly. She excused herself from class, went to the restroom, and suffered a spontaneous abortion in a stall of the women's restroom across from her class. Repeated calls to me went to voicemail. I was in a clean room test environment without my cell phone, so she called her mother, which also went to voicemail. Her next call was to her other mother, my mom. She rushed to be by her daughter-in-law's side. Kate did not feel an ambulance was warranted, and so when my mother found her seated at her desk, crying softly to herself, they walked to Emily's car and drove to the hospital. Her doctor told her that there was nothing physically wrong with her. Sometimes the body rejects the pregnancy. There might very well have been something wrong with the fetus that caused the rejection. If she wanted to try again, there is a good chance the pregnancy would go to term, although nothing is guaranteed. Kate did not want to take a chance on another pregnancy. She requested I get a vasectomy, and I did. Our family of 4 was plenty for me. But the miscarriage plunged Kate into a depression. The happy and lively girl I had grown up with was missing in action. All forms of affection from me were rebuffed. She became increasingly distant. She would not talk to me about it and became enraged when I mentioned her seeing a therapist. She stayed away from her friends and her social media went silent. For months I tiptoed around her, afraid to say the wrong thing and set her off. I spoke with our moms and they told me to give her time, and she would snap back. I wasn't so sure. Then suddenly, she seemed to get better. She was texting people again and posting on Facebook, and I began to see glimmers of the old Kate. Just as I thought things were getting better, one Saturday afternoon saw Kate rush through the front door shouting for Taylor and Kendall. She was almost frantic. Her eyes were wild and she was in a panic. "What is it, Kate?" I asked. I grabbed her by the shoulders to calm her. "What's going on? Why are you looking for the girls?" "I have to see them. I have to explain something to them. I think they may have misunderstood something." She was looking in every direction except towards me. At that moment, my daughters entered the house and walked up to her. "Did you tell him yet?" Taylor asked. "Of course not," Kendall said. "Otherwise, Dad would be pissed off and yelling at her." "Girls, let's talk about this in your room. This does not concern your father. I don't know what you think you saw, but you are wrong." They both gave Kate an incredulous look before turning to me. We were coming out of the movie theater at the mall. We walked right past the ticket line for the new Maria Montoya movie, and what do we see? Our mother kissing some asshole. In public. In the freaking mall. I looked at Kate with a deep frown. Kate. What's going on? Are you cheating on me? She burst into tears while standing in the kitchen. She saw us watching her, Kendall said. She ran after us, but we ducked into Engstrom's and lost her. We came home to tell you what we saw before she could lie to you about it. You're having an affair, I stated flatly. No. No, I'm not cheating on you or having an affair, she said, unable to look me in the eyes. Who is he? He's just a friend, she replied. I want a name, I said. I want to know which of your friends thinks it's okay to kiss my wife. I'm not going to tell you, Katie said. I'll tell him it can't happen again. We can be friends, but we can't do that again. Bullshit. You tell me who he is right ducking now, or the next time I speak to you will be in divorce court. Kate paled and her mouth opened in shock. You can't be serious. You would divorce me because of a friendship that went too far. Test me, I said. Go ahead, test me. Refuse to give me his name and see what I do. Duck around and find out. She broke. She gave me his name, Kevin Saunders, and the fact that he was an adjunct professor at a college. He had provided a sympathetic shoulder for her to cry on, which led to inappropriate conversations, which led to texting, which led to topless photos being sent. Thankfully faceless. Although the same couldn't be said of the deck pic he sent her. I told her to pack a bag and go to her parents. I didn't want to be around her now or for the foreseeable future. Kate was crying too hard to drive herself, so I dropped her off. Frank was working in his front yard and had to know that something serious was happening. His crying daughter just got dropped off with an overnight bag, and her husband, who was like a son to him, drove away with barely a wave. To her credit, Kate was honest with her parents. Then when my parents were called to come over, she was honest and apologetic to them as well. She was adamant that kissing was as far as things had gone. When asked how far things would have gone if the girls had not spotted her at the mall, Kate looked troubled. I hoped that nothing would have happened. I hoped that I would have come to my senses and realized that I was going down a dark road with no good ending. I just thank God that the girls saw me and brought everything to an end. Kate had not deleted any of their texts, and those texts did verify that they had not yet had sex. I had no illusions. If she had not been found out, she would have slept with him. I was somewhat innocent about matters of infidelity prior to this, but I quickly became well versed in the topic. I became a regular visitor to some of the online forums dedicated to infidelity and cheating. I learned a whole new vocabulary and a set of acronyms and abbreviations. The AP is the affair partner. The BS is the betrayed spouse. The WW is the wayward wife, and the WH is the wayward husband. The OPS is the other betrayed spouse. Day 1 is the day that you found out about the cheating. Day 2 is your second day, which usually comes because of trickle truth, because your WW does not tell you the full story, because they are in self-preservation mode. So, you do the 180, which is a form of communication that is 180 degrees from your normal loving communication. No irrelevant chit-chat. House or childcare issues only are discussed. The objective is to see you out of infidelity, either through reconciliation or divorce. Then there were the other websites. The pro-adultery sites where abbreviations like MM, married man, were used. The secrecy of an affair is kept hidden due to exercising OPSEC, operational security, as if the stealth and deceit needed to cheat and betray a trusting partner was CIA tradecraft. But I learned. I had missed the signs in the run-up to Kate's emotional affair, EA, and was thankful that it had not progressed to a physical affair, PA. I remembered that for a few weeks prior to day, she had taken to turning the phone away from me when she texted. She also took her phone into the bathroom with her and slept with her phone under her pillow. All these signs are glaringly obvious now, but when you love and trust someone you become an easy mark. The fallout of her little adventure was that I insisted that she quit her job. If she wanted to teach, she could teach high school or middle school. She also agreed to complete transparency with all electronic devices. No passcodes. No chatting apps other than Apple's native text app. No deleting of texts. Location is always on. I provided an older iPhone for her to log into all her apps, so I could monitor them. I maintained possession of that phone and put my own passcode on it. If there was any cheating going on, I would divorce her without hesitation. She agreed to everything. And little by little I began to trust her. I began the policing stage of our marriage by checking the cloned iPhone multiple times per day for messages, calls, and location. I log into her Apple App Store account once a day to check for downloaded apps that could be used for cheating. Not just dating apps or social media apps, but innocuous games that had internal messaging capabilities. I checked phone bills and compared the data used to what the cloned phone was indicating. She also started teaching at the high school. She was the only teacher at the high school with a PhD, and having Dr. Katherine Conroy on faculty was prestigious to the school. Kate had hoped to teach at university one day. Her thought was that she could teach a couple of courses a semester and use her office time to work on her novel. Her emotional affair derailed that for her so well she understood it was through her own actions that she now found herself teaching full-time in high school with very little opportunity to write her novel. She was also resentful towards me for imposing this upon her. We were attempting to work through her resentment and the aftermath of her affair when 18 months later we got devastating news. Cancer. During routine self-examination, Kate discovered a small lump on her right breast. Since it was small, she was not overly concerned about the lump, but scheduled mammography and consultation anyway. The mammography led to a biopsy which led to a diagnosis of breast cancer. Both Kate's mother and grandmother had mastectomies as a result of breast cancer diagnosis. In the case of her grandmother, the surgery came too late, and she passed away as a result. Kate's mother, Emily, had made the decision to have her breasts removed after her mother's diagnosis, and after testing revealed that she also carried the BRCA1 gene for breast cancer. Testing revealed that Kate did not carry the gene, and so was not planning to have her breast removed, since a lumpectomy would suffice. Her diagnosis, however, shook her to her core. Kate had been very proud of her body and her breasts. Even after breastfeeding 2 children, there remained a firm C-cup with no hint of sag or stretch marks. The idea of surgically removing her breasts sent Kate into a depressive tailspin that she was almost unable to come out of. She was distant and unhappy with me and our girls. The smallest frustration would unleash a response that was completely out of proportion to the offense. This went on for months until one day, she seemed to wake up and start being the Kate that we loved. This did bring up memories of what happened after her miscarriage. Depression followed by a sudden return to normal. I had not looked at the cloned iPhone in months, but I pulled it out of a drawer, charged it, and prepared myself for the worst. What I found was nothing. No text to strange numbers. No photos or videos were sent to someone else. No sketchy apps were downloaded or used. No dodgy search history. It seemed that through counseling and sheer force of will, Kate had returned. Of course, now I know I was fooling myself. What I had done was teach her how to be a better cheater. I had looked for burner phones several times in the past. Pockets of coats pushed to the back of the closet were searched. Shoeboxes and shoes checked. Nothing and nothing. I had checked under the seats of her car, the glove box, the console, and the trunk. Every place that could hide a phone, I checked. The one place I could not check was her classroom at school. If she was hiding a burner phone at school, it was beyond my resources to locate it. Kate did not use her cell phone or computer for anything that I could see or access. As diligent as I was, and as knowledgeable as I had become in the matter of infidelity, I was truly blindsided when her lover appeared at our house. The drive from Quanah, Texas to Amarillo was subdued. We were all lost in our thoughts about what had happened that morning. The girls knew that we would be getting divorced. They had caught their mother cheating during her first affair, and had begged us to fix the marriage. The second affair was much worse than the first. It had gone on for longer, was sexual, and had led to Kate falling in love with her fiancé. Christ, just the thought of that enraged me. The fact that she had evidently lied to him about our relationship hurt me in such a profound way that I could barely think about it. She was not only talking to some asshole about me, but lying about me in the process. I am a lot of things, but I am not, nor have I ever been abusive, either physically or mentally. We were not actually staying in Amarillo. Our plans were to stay at Palo Duro Canyon State Park. Palo Duro is the second largest canyon in the United States, the Grand Canyon being the largest. Our plan was to stay at the park for a couple of days, and then continue westward along I-40, which encompasses a good section of the old Route 66, going through Tucumcari, New Mexico to Albuquerque, with side trips north to Santa Fe, and then back south through the Indian Pueblos, before hitting Flagstaff, Arizona. From Flagstaff, it was north to Las Vegas for 3 days, and then continue west to Los Angeles. We planned to spend a week in La hitting Disneyland, Universal Studios, and all the other tourist sites in La and Hollywood. From La it was going to be north along the Pacific Coast Highway to San Francisco. We were going to spend several days in the area, seeing Fisherman's Wharf, and, now that the girls were 18, Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley. From there, we would pick up I-80 through Salt Lake City, Cheyenne, and then through Nebraska and Iowa until our next big stop, Chicago. We planned to stay in Chicago for a few days to check out the shopping on Michigan Avenue and the Cubs at Wrigley. We had budgeted a maximum of 5 days for Chicago, but if we thought it looked icy, we were okay with leaving early. From Chicago it was south to Nashville for a couple of days, then Memphis for a day or so. I wanted to see Graceland, and after seeing the movie Elvis and Austin Butler's performance as the king, the girls were completely on board with that as well. After Memphis, we would continue to head southwest through Arkansas and finish up back at our starting point of Fort Worth, Texas. It was going to be a month-long epic road trip that would provide a lifetime of memories for the four of us. Ha! As the saying goes, man plans, God laughs. Kate and I had been to Palo Duro Canyon as kids. It was on a joint family vacation, which pretty much described every vacation we ever took. We toured the canyon and climbed the various hiking trails, including hiking to the lighthouse, the iconic rock outcropping that is the most famous symbol of the canyon. We had also seen the musical Texas in the outdoor amphitheater at the canyon. It was the first live musical that we had seen and we were awestruck. The show is a singing and dancing story of the early pioneers of the Texas Panhandle that concluded with a fireworks display at the end. Seeing that show at an early age had engendered a love of musical theater for both myself and Kate that existed to this day. The twins had learned to love theater through us, and both of them had participated in high school musicals. Fortunately, they sang like their mother and not me. After hooking up the RV, we decided it was too late in the day for any hiking, so I grilled some hot dogs and opened a container of potato salad. I had started allowing the girls either one glass of wine or one beer with dinner, but only at home or with their parents. They both chose wine and looked at me with somber expressions. "I guess this means divorce," Taylor said. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Why would she do this to you? To us? And why would she lie about you? She told that guy you were abusive, Dad. You're about the least abusive person I've ever met," Kendall added. "I doubt that Mom could even tell you why she lied," Taylor said. I took a sip of my beer before replying. "You're right, T. I doubt that she could explain it. But I can." I hesitated for a minute before finishing my thoughts, but decided that the twins were 18 and I could have adult conversations with them. They're adults and I would talk to them like adults. No one wants to be the villain of their own story. There's a thing called the triangle of victimhood. There has to be a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor. Cheating and betraying me goes against your mother's core beliefs. She sees herself as a good and moral person. For her to justify her actions to herself, she needs to paint me as the villain, not herself. If she's the victim, that makes me the persecutor and her boyfriend or fiancé or whatever she calls him, the rescuer. Your mother knows that I am a loving, loyal partner who has forgiven her in the past. She has to portray me as controlling, abusive, and manipulative, so that I am the villain and not her. Like I said, no one wants to be the villain in their own story. The girls had thoughtful expressions on their faces. Taylor nodded her head. For Mom to be Snow White and Dipshit the prince, you have to be who? The huntsman. The wicked queen. I nodded. One of them. Both of them. I don't know for sure. But soon it's not going to be my problem. I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket. I'm going to check my messages. You girls stand back in case this thing explodes. They both giggled and pulled out their phones as well. As my phone powered up, it went crazy, dinging, buzzing, and lighting up as the texts, missed calls, and voicemails came through. I should have immediately blocked Kate before leaving Fort Worth, but I hadn't and was paying for it now. I quickly rectified that oversight. I also deleted her texts and voicemails. That left several texts from my mother, Kate's mom, and Kate's dad. Strangely, there were none from my dad. My mother's texts began with a concerned tone before becoming increasingly unhinged. "Mom. Pete, call me right away. I'm concerned. Mom. Pete, call me right back. This is important. Mom. Peter, I need you to call me right now. Mom. Damn it, Peter. You need to stop with this BS and call me. Mom. Damn you, Peter. You better duck and call me right away if you know what's good for you. Mom. Alright, so that's the way you want to play this. This is not going to end well for you, I promise you that." Wow, I thought. I wonder what her voicemails sound like. The answer was, just like her texts, only increasingly angry and belligerent. Her first voicemail set the tone and they were progressively worse. "Mom. Peter, your wife is in hysterics. You need to fix this right ducking now. So, she made a mistake. You need to put your ego aside, put your big boy pants on, and take care of your wife. Mom. Peter, I am ashamed to call you my son. You left your crying wife with a stranger and went on vacation. You are pathetic and I am embarrassed that I carried you for 9 months." I was playing the messages on speaker so that the twins could hear them. To say they were shocked was the understatement of the year. They were shaken and distraught. "I can't believe Mimi said those awful things to you," Taylor said. Kendall had paled and was openly weeping. "I guess we know whose side she is going to take." The texts and voicemails from Kate's parents were not as angry or hostile as the ones from my mother, but you could tell they were upset and angry. And it was obvious that I was the source of their anger. There were no texts or voicemails from my dad. That was odd. I deleted all the texts and voicemails, and then watched as the girls deleted theirs without listening to them. We then powered down our phones and stared into the fire as we thought about this shit show of a day. We had a blast hiking the canyon the next day and going to see Texas that night. The girls loved the show and it was every bit as cool as I remembered it. We stayed 2 days in Amarillo and then picked up I-40 and headed west. We had calculated 4 weeks for vacation, but we were actually gone 5 weeks. Some of our side trips that we had budgeted as one day took up 2 to 3 days. Eventually, though, we knew that we had to go home. The girls needed to be in Austin next week for their dorm assignments and class registration. The original plan was for the 4 of us to rent a U-Haul and tow it behind my crew cab pickup truck, and we would get the girls moved into their dorm room. They were sharing a room their first semester, so this would be a pretty uncomplicated move. That is until their mother decided to blow up all our lives. My father was sitting on the front porch of our house as we drove up. I looked around but did not see Kate, her parents, or my mother. Since his motorcycle was in the driveway, I knew that they did not ride with him, so he must be alone. I got out of the RV and stretched before walking to the house. "Dad," I said. "Pete," he acknowledged. "What's new?" He chuckled. "I'll assume that's not a serious question." "Not really. You alone?" "Yep. They don't know about the GPS in the RV, and Frank is as computer savvy as your grandmother, and she's been dead 10 years. They don't know we're back." This shocked the hell out of me. I was braced for war and came home to nothing. "Nah, I thought I'd keep it to myself. Y'all's phone's been off this whole time." We picked up a couple of burner phones in Flagstaff. The girls wanted to stay in touch with their friends, and I needed to stay in touch with work and Terry. He nodded. "Well, Terry did his job. She was served last week at her parents' house." "I guess it didn't go well," I said. "Boy, that's the ducking understatement of the year. Kate's been in lockdown in the psych ward ever since she was served. Her parents are upset and raging at you and raging at the girls, and basically raging at everyone but Kate and your mother." "Where is Mother dearest?" I asked. After listening to her voicemails, I know that I'm not her favorite person. "None of you are," he nodded towards the twins. "She's so mad at the 3 of you that she can't even form a coherent sentence. This whole week has been a Tijuana donkey show." "I'll explain the term later," I said to the girls. I could tell they were about to ask about Tijuana donkey shows, and that was not a conversation I was in the mood for. "Your mother is at her house," Dad said. I gave my father a puzzled look. "Her house?" "Her house," he confirmed. "I've filed for divorce as well." We paused our conversation after that bombshell in order to unload the RV and then clean it. Afterward, we grilled burgers for dinner and chatted about our trip. Avoided was the topic of Kate and her lover, my mother, and the other set of grandparents. I told the girls that I did not have a problem with them going to see their mother, but they declined. They did want to go see what their friends were up to, so after dinner, they each gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek and promised to be back by midnight. I grabbed a bottle of Melon Green, 2 tumblers, and a couple of cigars, and met my father on the patio. I poured a couple of fingers of bourbon for each of us, and then we performed the cigar lighting ritual that most men learn at a young age. We puffed and sipped in silence, and watched the shadows of the night grow. "So, what happened?" I asked. Dad took a sip of bourbon before replying. "She's always been really close to Emily and her family. Sometimes I felt that she was closer to them than to her own family, me, you, and the girls. When the whole thing blew up with Kate, I expected your mother to take your side and be angry with Kate. And that didn't happen," I stated. He shook his head. "Not even a little bit. She was furious at you for reacting by leaving. Furious at her granddaughters for leaving with you. And furious with me because I said I didn't blame you. I didn't see her texts to you at the time, but I saw them later on. I did hear her leaving voicemails to you. I was not happy about what she was saying to you, but I didn't say anything to her at the time. There didn't seem to be any point in throwing gas on that particular fire. I know you, and I know after the last time, when she got involved with that other guy, that you were done with her. You knew about the other time." I was surprised at this. I had told no one. "I heard Kate, Emily, and your mother talking about it a few months after it happened. I know it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was bad enough. But not nearly as bad as this. After a few days, it was obvious that the 3 of you had turned your cell phones off. Find My iPhone wasn't working for her, and you weren't responding to texts or voicemails. Each day was more of a shit show than the day before. Kate spent hours crying and wailing and carrying on. Her parents were getting desperate, and your mother was becoming increasingly angry with you and hostile towards me. After a week, her parents had Kate locked up in the psych ward at Methodist. They were afraid she was going to kill herself. That really set your mother off. Dipshit hanging around didn't help any, either. Wait, what? I asked with what I knew was an incredulous tone. Her boyfriend was still in the picture. Dad just nodded his head. He kept saying that he was not leaving her side. He wouldn't abandon her like her asshole husband. My father glanced my way with an apologetic look. His words, not mine. Well, isn't that just duck and dandy, I said. I tried to encourage him to get the duck out, but Emily and your mother wanted him around. Honestly, I don't think Kate did, but she was a basket case, so I don't know what was going on in her mind. In the last conversation I had with your mother, I told her the son of a witch needed to leave or else I would. What does she say? I asked. Don't make me choose between Emily's family and you. You might not like how it goes for you. Duck me, I sighed. I always suspected she liked Emily's family better than her own, but to come right out with it. The next day I moved into one of the condos the firm keeps for clients. I also had Terry Carr refer me to a divorce attorney. I didn't feel right using yours. After that, we sat and sipped our bourbon and smoked our cigars, contemplating our futures in silence. 2 marriages blown up due to infidelity, one directly and one as collateral damage. I agreed to meet with Kate at her parents' house. My condition for the meeting was that it would be just the 2 of us. No parents. And definitely no Dipshit. Kate had always been a beauty. Tall, lean, and fit. Blonde and lightly tanned. She had always looked at least a decade younger than her 42 years, and this incident had not changed that. My heart jumped into my throat when she opened the door to my knock. Both of her parents' cars as well as my mother's car were not present when I drove up. I had made a recon of the area a couple of hours before our meeting time and had seen all 3 vehicles in the driveway. I had also noted the same vehicle that her lover had driven to her house a few weeks ago. It was parked in the street 2 houses down from her parents' house. 2 hours later, at our appointed meeting time, I had circled the block and saw his Mustang 2 streets over from Frank and Emily's house. My mother's car was parked behind him and there were 2 people in his car. Just duck and dandy. Hi baby, Kate said while opening her arms and moving towards me for a hug. Stop, Kate. I don't want a hug from you. I stepped into the living room and made my way towards an armchair. I usually sat on the sofa with Kate when we visited, but I did not want to give her the opportunity to sit beside me. She sighed and sat on the sofa facing me. Baby, we have to get through this. We have too much love between us to throw it all away just because I made a stupid mistake. Mistake? Getting engaged to another man while you are still married to me is what you call a mistake. I shook my head. I'm here to discuss the next steps in our divorce. Terry Carr tells me you have not given him the name of your attorney. That's because I don't want a divorce. I want you. I think that we can save our marriage. Correction, I know we can save our marriage. I love you and I know you love me. We can do anything we set our minds to. What about your fiancé? Don't you think he might have something to say about that? I asked dryly. He's not my fiancé. Yes, I had an affair with him. It was wrong and I regret it. I like him, but I am not in love with him. I love only you. Are you still seeing him? Kate did not look me in the eyes. She focused on her hands and started twisting her wedding ring set. He stopped by to check up on me. How often? Once? Twice? Daily? Every day, all day. Kate had tears in her eyes and was becoming visibly emotional. You left me, she cried out. You drove off and left me crying in our front yard. He was there for me when you weren't. So let me get this straight, you went to him because you were upset that I left you. And the reason that I left you was because you cheated on me with him. It was like the old joke about the kid on trial for killing his parents asking the judge to have mercy on a poor orphan. Yes, but it's over with him. I am not seeing him now, she said. So, if I get in my car and drive around the neighborhood, I won't see him 2 streets over sitting in his car with my mother. Kate's eyes grew white as she realized that I wasn't buying her bullshit. I stood and said, Kate, get an attorney and give him Terry's information. You can get married to Dipshit and I can get on with my life. We'll see each other at weddings and funerals and eventually, we'll be out of each other's life forever. You'll just be someone I used to be married to. She looked at me in horror. She had grown pale as paper. No. I can't never see you, Kate started sobbing. She wrapped her arms around her upper body and started rocking back and forth, chanting, no. I stood and looked sadly at my soon-to-be ex-wife. I shook my head and left the house. I drove 2 streets over, pulled next to Dipshit's car, and rolled down my window. His window was already down. I looked across him to my mother as she looked back with undisguised hostility. I just left Kate and she's a mess. You might want to go check on her. I'm done with y'all. I headed home. Nothing is ever easy, so I did not expect the divorce to be either. Kate got an attorney. A vicious pit bull by the name of Donna Rafferty. DKR, as she was known in the media, was well known for securing the largest divorce settlement in Texas history. When Dallas society maven Pauline Pickett, née French, sued her husband, oilman Danny Pickett Jr. for divorce, and walked away with a $270 million settlement. Everyone and their brother had warned Jr. about Pauline because everyone and their brother had taken Pauline for a test drive at one time or another. But Jr. wasn't his old man. Sr. was known to wear a leather belt with a hole in the right front, from where he had been gut shot in a bar fight. He not only didn't go down and stayed down, he beat to death with a pull cue the guy who shot him. Sr. was smart and tough, all things that Jr. was not. But Sr. had died in a plane crash a half dozen years back, leaving Jr. his oil company. I knew that I was in for a battle. First, they demanded marriage counseling. I refused. The marriage wasn't broken, my wife was. That got me nowhere except for a court-mandated 10 sessions for which I had to pay. I did get to choose the counselor, but that was a small comfort. Dennis Lampier advertised himself as a marriage counselor specializing in infidelity trauma. His online reviews were glowing and he was on the court's approved list. My initial phone interview with him went well. It was not until me and Kate were sitting in front of him that I realized that this was probably going to go sideways. Mr. and Mrs. Conroy, what are you looking to achieve out of these counseling sessions? I made a mental note to add to my list of demands that Kate go back to her maiden name. I made a mistake. I had an affair with another man. I feel horrible about it, and want to find a way to get past my mistake and use it to build a better, stronger marriage. I looked at her in disbelief. She's still seeing the jackass. She's engaged to him, for duck's sake. Dennis admonished me, we try to avoid shouting or profanity in these sessions. Please be calm and respectful of each other. Kate, is this true? Are you really engaged to another man while telling us you're trying to save this marriage? It's true Brian has asked me to marry him. I told him no, I want to save my marriage. I looked at Lampier. Would you say that this is textbook monkey branching? Why would you ask that? He replied. She won't commit to her boyfriend unless she knows for sure that our marriage is beyond saving. But she won't commit to her marriage unless I commit to being her husband. It's monkey branching at its most basic. Kate chose that moment to speak up. If you promise to stay married to me, I'll tell him I can't marry him. I'll give back the ring. I just stared at her for a minute. The fact that we are even talking about whether or not you accepted a marriage proposal from another man tells me how bad this marriage is. When was the last time you had sex with him? Kate began twisting her wedding ring. At that point, I knew that this was going to be a complete go duck. I don't remember, she said. Come on Kate, nobody believes that. You're a smart woman. You have your doctorate. You know exactly how many times you had sex with him. When was the last time you had sex with him? This morning, she said softly, tears rolling down her face. I'm so sorry, Pete. It was this morning. I stood, nodded once to the therapist, and walked out the door. I knew that this was going to get ugly, and it did. In an effort to get me to see reason, they went after everything I owned. The business. The patents. Everything. At this point, I just wanted out. The girls had started college in Austin. I had moved them into their dorm, much to their mother's dismay. I declined her request to join us. She appealed to the twins and they too said no. They had no sympathy for her and wanted as little to do with their mother as possible. I had blocked my mother, so I had no idea she tried to reach out to me and didn't care. My parents' divorce was finalized well before mine. My mother had a good job as a CPA, so spousal maintenance was not a consideration. My father signed over the house to her, and since it was paid off long ago, she had minimal expenses. She agreed to not touch his law partnership, and they parted ways. My dad felt that he could no longer be in practice with Frank, so he exercised an option that forced Frank to either buy him out or disband the law practice. Frank bought him out and my father moved to Austin and became of counsel to Bonham, McLeod and Garcia, the oldest law firm in Texas. Eventually, Kate and DKR ran out of ways to drag the divorce out. I signed over the house to Kate. I sold my business for a pittance, basically the value of the land, building, and equipment, and gave Kate half the proceeds. Kate also received half ownership of my patents. I took a step further and agreed to sign over the patents to her in full with the agreement that this ended things, and she would sign the papers. Every roadblock that they threw my way, I acquiesced to. There would be no further attempts to extract additional money or property from me. This was it. Finito. Done. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. By the time the divorce was finalized, I too had moved to Austin. I purchased a condo on Lake Travis within walking distance of a number of restaurants and shops. The twins visited several times a week for dinner and frequently brought their friends. They made frequent use of the condo complex swimming pool, and on any given weekend, there were any number of bikini-clad co-eds going in and out of my condo. I was amazed at how many helpful young men lived in Austin. Every weekend I received offers to help with any and all projects that I may need done around the condo. Of course, the fact that there would likely be a half-dozen, skimpily attired co-eds around had nothing to do with it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, the twins, me and my father, were having a glass of wine on the deck of my condo. I had grilled kebabs and made a rice pilaf along with a salad for dinner. I could tell that something was bothering the girls and finally just came out and asked them what was wrong. "Mom called this morning," Taylor said. "Oh? How's your mother doing these days?" I asked. "She found out that the patents you assigned to her were almost worthless. It seems some new startup named PTK Incorporated has patents that render the old patents obsolete. Every company that was licensing them is allowing their old licenses to sunset, so they can license the new patents." No one had ever heard of PTK Incorporated. It's just an amazing coincidence that the first letters of Peter, Taylor, and Kendall make up the name of PTK Incorporated. They both smirked at me. I just raised my wine glass in salute to having 2 very bright daughters. "But that's not why she called," Kendall said. She had tears in her eyes. "She's getting married next Saturday and wants us to come to the wedding." I slowly shook my head. "You didn't see that coming?" I asked into the night. I did not get an answer. My daughters had wished their mother good luck with her upcoming nuptials, but explained that they would not be attending. They did not approve and did not wish to have any sort of relationship with her new husband. They said that Kate was sad, but she understood. Mom takes full responsibility for blowing up her marriage. She knows it was the biggest mistake of her life. With the exception of Pop here, she said with a nod to their grandfather, our grandparents have enabled her or egged her on. I can't figure out why they have such hostility to you. My father finally spoke up. It's because you turned your back on their little princess. Don't get me wrong, I love Kate, or at least I did before all this went down. But she's always been spoiled. First by her parents, and I'm including your mother in that group. Then by you. She never learned how to adult. She's always had someone looking out for her. I'm worried about her. She should not be getting married. At least not this soon. And not to this guy. But of course, the wedding went on. As the daughter of a prominent Fort Worth attorney, the wedding made the society pages. What was not mentioned was the bride's first husband, or 2 college-aged daughters. Also not mentioned was the bride's suicide attempt on her wedding night. On Saturday night, while Kate was marrying Dipshit, I had settled in on my deck for the evening with a bottle of Garrison Brothers small batch bourbon and a cigar. I was in a melancholy mood and had brought my guitar out on the deck with me. I seldom played the guitar and only sang in the car at the shower, but when I am feeling down, the guitar inevitably comes out along with the bourbon. I had not touched the guitar in over a year, and had stumbled a bit trying to play the opening to Guy Clark's Love Freeway. It's a song that at one time I could play in my sleep, but struggled with now. I had just played the song non-stop with no, or at least minimal, mistakes when my phone started vibrating, and ringing, and vibrating. So multiple calls came through all at once from the twins and my father. I declined my dad and answered Taylor's call. "Dad, have you heard?" she asked with no hello or preliminaries. "Heard what?" "Hang on, Kendall was leaving you a voicemail." I could hear Taylor call out to her sister, "Kay, I have Dad on the phone." Then to me, "Dad, I'm putting you on speaker." "Okay, we're both here. Mom tried to kill herself tonight." I could hear Kendall sobbing in the background and Taylor trying to keep herself together. "What happened?" "She took a whole bottle of sleeping pills and lay down in the bathtub." This was during her wedding reception. She snuck out, went to her room, and tried to kill herself. Emily and Mom went looking for her and made housekeeping go into the room to do a welfare check, otherwise, she would be dead. I exhaled slowly. I knew that Kate was derailing her life by her actions, but this was bad. This was very bad. It's a good thing she has family close by to help her get through this. Sucks for her new husband. I was sad for my ex-wife, but as the saying goes, not my monkeys, not my circus. Or the Texas version, not my cows, not my pasture. "Can we drive up with you?" they asked. "Are you going tonight or in the morning?" I was caught off guard by their question. "I don't plan on going up there at all. I don't wish your mother any ill will, but she fired me from the job of being her husband. If you all don't want to drive, I'll pay for your plane tickets and take you to the airport. I'm sure one of the grandparents can pick you up." They were not happy about that and made their feelings known. The next morning found the four of us on I-35 headed north towards Dallas. I was surprised that my dad wanted to come. He said that he wouldn't have missed the sheet show. I dropped my dad off at the Hilton so he could get us checked in, and I drove the girls to the hospital. The receptionist directed us to the waiting room, and the first person I saw was Dipshit sitting by himself staring morosely at the floor. My mother saw me and approached with fire in her eyes. "This is on you," she said. "All you had to do was as far as she got before my daughters were in her face. You need to back the duck up, you crazy old witch," Taylor said. "Yeah, back off, Mimi," Kendall said. "This is all on Mom. She lied and cheated on our dad. She got engaged to the man she was cheating with. She continued to see him while faking a reconciliation with Daddy, and then she ends up marrying the asshole. And then tries to kill herself. So, tell us, my dear sweet grandmother, how's any of this bullshit our dad's fault?" My mother seemed to collapse in on herself as she sat and started sobbing. Emily sat next to her and they cried in each other's arms. Frank put his hand on my shoulder. "None of this is your fault, Pete. Everything that has gone wrong is either her fault or our fault. We should have shut this asshole down the first time he came around after you and the girls left. It's to our shame that we let him stick around." Dipshit glared balefully at us as we discussed him. "What's going to happen to her?" I asked Frank. "We'll take her home and get her some help. She's in desperate need of therapy." "I'll take her home with me." Dipshit stood up and faced us. "She's my wife." "Go duck yourself," I said. "She may decide to go to you one day, but today is not that day." Frank interjected himself between us. He explained that Kate was going home to her mother where she could be looked after. If Kate wanted to continue to be married, then she could make that decision when her mental health improved. Dipshit didn't like that answer and stormed off. Shortly after this, my daughters were allowed to see their mother. They came back to the waiting room after 15 minutes and hugged me while crying softly. "Mom wants to see you, Daddy," Kendall said. My mother, Emily, and Frank all looked at me with hope in their eyes. "Please, Pete," Frank said. "It'll be good for her." I shook my head sadly. "I can't do that. I'm not a relative and I'm not a friend. I'm just someone that she used to be married to." The three of them started crying as my statement hung in the air. I turned and walked out of the hospital. 4 days later we were back in Austin. Before we left Fort Worth, I had a discussion with Frank about what happened after I moved to Austin. When Kate and Dipshit found out the patents that I had signed over to them were worthless, their plans quickly unwound. Kate had envisioned that her lifestyle would change little. Dipshit had thought that he had hit the jackpot. The gorgeous wife and the thriving manufacturing company was his golden ticket to a life that he had only dreamed about. He would quit teaching and run his wife's company. First, they found out I sold my company for pennies on the dollar. Since I sold it to the employees, there was nothing they could do. Then they found out my patents were being replaced by newer patents that were in no way based on the old patents, so there was no infringement. They were going to have to keep grinding it out as school teachers. This was a bigger deal for Dipshit. Kate felt that she deserved every bad thing that happened to her. She was ashamed of her cheating. She was ashamed that she lied and deceived me. She was ashamed that she fought the divorce and caused me more pain and suffering. She adamantly did not want to marry Dipshit, but she felt she had to. Otherwise, what would have been the point of everything she put her family through? To destroy her marriage and burn her life to the ground for no good reason. No, at least by getting married she could pretend that everything worked out for the best. But when Frank had walked Kate towards her future husband, he knew that something was wrong. Kate seemed to be sleepwalking down the aisle. She was almost in a daze. Frank had wondered if she had taken tags but dismissed the idea. Kate had never been interested in drags. She had disappeared before the wedding dance of the bride and groom, and Emily and my mother had gone in search of her. I shook my head at the waste of it all. I had loved Kate with a deep romantic love that was immutable and unassailable. So, life went on. The girls continued in college. My new patents proved to be winners, and we were able to double our sales of the new company. And I started dating. People had told me I would not have trouble finding dates, but I didn't believe them. My daughters had me join Tinder, Bumble, and a couple of other sites. They wrote my profile and took a couple of thousand photos to find just the right pictures for my profile. I went on several dates, but I was not happy with the women that were interested in me. I got back into shape, losing my dad bod and returning to my college weight. I knew that looked more than presentable and considered myself a good catch, but the women that I was dating were not what I was looking for. My buddy Terry Carr had decided to concentrate on trusts and estate planning, and was phasing out the part of his law practice that represented my business. When I asked him for a recommendation for an Austin attorney, he did not hesitate to recommend the firm that my father worked with. They're the best in the state, if not the country. You couldn't ask for better representation. With that endorsement, I asked my father to set up a meeting with someone who could represent my business interests. The attorney I met with was Elizabeth Garcia. Elizabeth was not as tall as Kate, but she was also lithe and possessed of an athletic build. Her hair was a deep auburn, and her skin was a light tan with almond-shaped green eyes. She was exotic, she was gorgeous, and there was no way that I could hire her as an attorney. Attorneys could not date clients, and I was smitten with her. After 2 dates we were exclusive. After 6 dates, we knew that we would marry. I was 43 and Elizabeth was 32. Elizabeth was also divorced. She had married a fellow attorney, but discovered the major reason that he pursued her was in hopes of a partnership with Bonham, McLeod, Garcia. When he discovered that he would not be able to leverage his marriage to Emily into a position, much less a partnership, he started cheating on her. The divorce was quick and painless for Elizabeth, excruciating for her husband to the point that he decamped for California. Marrying an older man was not a problem for Elizabeth. One of her ancestors, Angelica Garcia, had been 10 years younger than her husband, Robert Bonham, who had founded the law firm of Bonham, McLeod, Garcia nearly 200 years ago. As I dated Elizabeth, I occasionally would think about my old life. Being married to Kate and living in Fort Worth with my daughters in my company. My parents and Kate's parents living close to us and just a short car ride away. I thought I had a lock on happiness. But things change. My parents were divorced. I barely spoke to my mother. When I did, she would whine about reconciling with Kate. Kate's parents were having a rocky time of it, and from what I had heard, divorce was on the table. They missed their granddaughters and the old life they had. And Kate, after checking out of the hospital, she moved back in with her parents. Dipshit was not happy about that. His unhappiness was compounded when she filed for an annulment of the marriage. 18 months after our divorce was finalized, and 15 months after her suicide attempt, Kate appeared at my front door. When I answered the doorbell that Saturday morning, I was shocked to find my ex-wife standing there with a roll-around suitcase standing next to her. "Kate, what are you doing here?" I asked. I was dumbfounded by her presence. I know I have a lot to make up for. I was the worst wife in the world and a terrible mother to our daughters. I'm here to set things right. I had no clue as to what to say to this statement. I just stood there with my mouth open. "Honey, who's at the door?" My wife's voice brought me to my senses. Elizabeth strode into the entryway. She was wearing navy yoga pants and a white tank top, her baby bump leading the way. I had my vasectomy reversed after our return from our honeymoon. I knew Elizabeth wanted a child, however I thought I might be too old. She convinced me I was not. I looked at Kate standing in the doorway and then at my wife standing in the foyer, a curious expression on her face. "Someone I used to be married to," I replied as I gently closed the door. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell to catch the next story. The loyalty of children is a powerful thing, isn't it? Until our next adventure, take care and stay tuned for more tales right here. See you soon.